Hola, it's time for another segment of A Critical Perspective, Micdrops, where I recognize those truth bombs that I couldn't have said any better myself. Today's mic drop is from Dr. Voddie Baucham, one of the most important voices in our current climate of chaos. I first heard of Dr. Baucham over 5 years ago, and since that time I've watched several of his sermons and interviews. In fact, his messages got me through hundreds of miles during my road trips last year to honor fallen police officers. His book, Fault Line, is one of the most important literary works ever published because he does a masterful job at exposing the cultural Marxist movement that is destroying many pillars of our nation. Speaking of masterful, he presents a master class on how to handle the corrupt members of the aristocracy. In this clip, he exposes Dr. Rashad Richey, who I believe has a PhD in race baiting, on his own show. Let's check this out.
Let's start with the social justice movement. I believe that church should be a place that expresses and transforms policy because of its value system. What are your thoughts about the Black Lives Matter movement?
Wow, well, that's two very different things. The Black Lives Matter movement is very anti-church, it's very anti-Christian. It's a Marxist organization that was started explicitly as a Marxist organization that had openly anti-family and openly anti-Christian sentiments. Those sentiments had to be removed from their website because people found out about them. So if you're asking me about faith and Black Lives Matter, I would say that the two are mutually exclusive, especially from a Christian perspective.
And there are some definite positives that Black Lives Matter. They've been able to work and negotiate with various governments around the country.
You mean in order to enrich themselves personally?
Well, let's go ahead and get into it, brother, since you posed the question. So let's talk about the social justice movement of Black Lives Matter. If Jesus was here, do you think he would say Black Lives Matter?
Well, if Jesus was here, he would say lives matter. I know, for example, if Jesus was here, he would say that the Black lives that are being obliterated in the womb matter. And as a Christian, I believe that lives matter from the moment of conception all the way to their moment of natural death. Okay. And so I'm absolutely committed to lives mattering, but I will not be held captive by an organization that has used that terminology in order to back people into a corner and cause them to live with this cognitive dissonance between the organization that again is antithetical to biblical Christianity, and the idea that people, regardless of who they are and where they come from, matter. I'm a Christian. I believe people are made in the image of God and have inherent dignity, worth, and value.
Let me go to a statement you made about Jesus would say all lives matter. Remember the parable of the sheep, brother?
Actually, I said Jesus would say lives matter.
Do you remember the parable of the sheep?
If I listen, you corrected me earlier for interrupting you. I'm gonna correct you now for misquoting me. I said brother, Jesus said lives.
Okay, that's fine. That's a distinction that doesn't make a difference. My question to you was, would he say Black Lives Matter? And you did not agree that he would say Black Lives Matter. That was the genesis of my question. So my second question to you is, do you remember the parable of the sheep?
Yes.
You're a theologian.
Yes.
In that parable, Jesus talks about walking 100 sheep, and then one goes astray. You see, I believe Jesus would have said Black Lives Matter because if you go to a community, brother, and you're looking at the deprivation in that community, there's an emphasis that needs to be placed on making sure we have economic equity, making sure that we have social access, making sure that we have reforms in policing and criminal justice, because those are the biases that we've been living under. So that would be the sheep in the ditch, brother, and the shepherd would pay attention to that one, as the parable says when Jesus spoke it. You don't agree with that?
Not at all, because you completely misused that text. The parable is one of 3 parables that were told together. The lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. The emphasis there is on the fact that the Pharisees did not celebrate when individuals came to faith in Christ. So you absolutely obliterated the meaning of that text.
How did I misuse the text?
You misused the text because you allegorized the text in order to pour your meaning into it, when Jesus very clearly used that text in order to say something very specific. You don't get to change what he meant by that.
What was the specifics of the text?
The specifics of the text were to rebuke the Pharisees because they were not celebrating when people came to faith in Christ. It didn't have anything to do with economic equity.
Because I don't have unlimited time, let me ask you about the social movement Black Lives Matter again. Do you think the social movement of Black Lives Matter is a bad thing, or do you think it's a good thing?
No, I think it's a bad thing. I think
Tell me why.
Number one, I think it's dividing people. Let me go back to what you said earlier.
But people are already divided, brother.
Can I? Again, are we going to be equitable, since you're about equity? Can we be equitable in the way that we communicate with one another?
I got 1 minute, man. Go ahead, Doc.
So what I'm saying is, by the way, I love this.
Yeah, it's good.
What I'm saying is that if you go to those cities that you mentioned, yes, BLM got involved in Minneapolis and Atlanta, and the crime rate skyrocketed specifically because of the things that they got involved in.
All right, that's
you have what's called this Ferguson effect. It's absolutely true. Anybody can go and look at this at the crime records before BLM got involved and after.
Okay, all right, I got to come to a close. My producer's giving me the rap sign. Yes, some of these cities have seen a rise in crime, but you want to blame Black Lives Matter for the rise in crime when you are ignoring the fact that police officers called in with the blue flu, that cops refused to respond to calls, that executives and law enforcement and executives as politicians
why should that matter? Because Black Lives Matter wants to defund the police.
Unwilling to actually police.
Black Lives Matter wants to defund the police, so they want
exactly to reprioritize the budget.
No, sir.
Let me give you an idea.
Defund
Let me give you an idea. Let me give you an idea to consider. And they should defund it.
It's a radical Marxist idea.
But think about what you're saying. But before I let you go, brother, you go around the entire world, literally the whole planet, and you preach what you call to be truth. Do you tell the white evangelicals you preach to they need to get rid of that picture of white Jesus?
I tell them they need to get rid of pictures of Jesus, period, because it's a violation of the second commandment.
But I think Jesus is okay.
A picture of Jesus is a violation of the second commandment. So I don't want to see any pictures of Jesus because it's a violation of the second commandment. It's a graven image.
But you tell them to get rid of their white Jesus.
It's a graven image. They need to get rid of it. They shouldn't be pictures of Jesus.
Doc, I got to bring you back on when we have more time. But I appreciate you, man. You're a good sport, brother. All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Bravo. Bravo. Folks, that's a TKO. That's a TKO. I'm sure he will never be invited back on. In fact, I bet Rashad went looking for a safe space and a comfort toy after that beatdown. He was so whipped. All he could do was go to white Jesus. I mean, he had nothing left. See, this is what happens to the aristocracy when their race baiting won't work because they're debating someone who happens to be black. You see, they can't play the racism, white supremacy, white privilege bullcrap. So in most cases, they just resort to calling us names. You know, sellout, Uncle Tom, coon, wannabe, et cetera, et cetera. See, because Marxists want to intimidate you into being quiet so you don't expose their lies. But it's men like Dr. Voddie Baucham who the Lord is using to wake people up all across the world to the schemes of cultural Marxism. So Dr. Baucham, this mic drop is for you. Thank you for your honesty and thank you for all of your work. Thank you for being willing to stand for truth and being a voice of clarity in a climate of chaos and corruption. And sadly, this is not just in the world. We're seeing a lot of this inside of the church. I'm looking forward to finally meeting you in person this weekend at the Roll Call 2.0 conference with the Fearless Army and presenting you with a Micdrop trophy. Go to VoddieBaucham.org to keep up with everything that's going on with Voddie Baucham Ministries. Also, let's help him overcome the suppression of his new book. The title is It's Not Like Being Black: How Sexual Activists Hijacked the Civil Rights Movement. So that's a wrap for this edition of A Critical Perspective. Mic drops. If you love this country and the freedom it brings, if you've been redeemed by the King of Kings, then I'm your brother, no matter your color. Remember this: life isn't fair, but God is just.